Well, good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to have so many of you here with us tonight, and a warm welcome to those of you beaming in via the internet. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our Lab to Leadership event. I'm James Wallman. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Science, for those of you who don't know me. And a very special welcome to our guests from outside the university, to whom you'll be introduced shortly, and to my senior colleagues from other parts of UTS outside the Faculty of Science who are with us tonight. Now, I'd like to start, before introducing the details of the event, I'd like to start tonight by also introducing you to the faculty's new Associate Dean for Indigenous Leadership and Engagement, Professor Brad Mogridge. If you'd be kind enough to stand up, please, Brad. Brad officially joined us only on Monday, and yes, very exciting. He's going to be working with us through this year in this Associate Dean capacity, but he also holds a professorship associated with the discipline of environmental sciences in the School of Life Sciences, because Brad is a global expert in Indigenous water science. So what he's going to be interested in working on at the university, beyond promoting Aboriginal Indigenous knowledge, is to find ways of creating an intersection between these traditional Indigenous knowledges, traditional science and Western science, in order to influence policy and the way that we manage Australian natural resources. So we're thrilled to have Brad with us, and since he's on site today and tomorrow, we've got a perfect opportunity to bring him along this evening and have the privilege of giving him the opportunity to deliver an acknowledgement of country. So thank you very much, Brad.
Yeah, everyone. It's awesome to be here in Sydney. So I grew up on the lands of the Toongagal, so Toongabbie, and staying at Mum's tonight at Toongabbie. So it's cool to be back home. Live in Canberra, so yeah, fresh at UTS. Was at the University of Canberra for seven and a half years, but it's time for a new opportunity. So yeah, look, I'm live on the lands of the Ngunnawal people, so I just want to do a quick acknowledgement and acknowledge the people of the Gadigal and their lands and their elders and the people that have gone prior generations, and obviously the elders today. And hopefully we have a good session tonight, and I thank them for allowing us to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad. Now, tonight's event, which is an initiative of our Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning, Professor Willa Houston, was inspired by the Faculty of Science's suite of Lab to Leadership courses, which were started just last year. And one example of them, for those of you who have perused the suite of offerings, is the Master of Medical Science Leadership, which is already attracting a good amount of attention. These courses were developed in recognition of the fact that in order to do better at bringing scientific, in order to do better at equipping our scientists of the future to make a real difference in helping to solve the global challenges of the world, we needed to do better at ensuring that they introduced their scientific thinking to the nation's boardrooms, policy settings, and diverse decision-making environments. So those of us that have a science background know that this equips you with a very special and unique way of thinking about the world that stays with you forever. Scientists are trained in an evidence-based approach to solving problems and bringing creativity and innovation together into their thinking framework. But to enhance the influence of this unique way of thinking in the modern world, we need to give our scientists a better understanding of leadership, of business acumen and communication skills, above what they will just learn on the job. So this powerful combination will be an increasingly important way of tackling the world's many problems and creating change as a result. So at UTS, we're very committed to social justice and producing graduates who can influence the world around them. And our suite of leadership courses, many of which are run online, will enable scientists, mathematicians, allied health experts, some engineers, pharmacists, and those in related fields to reskill to become policy leaders and decision makers, as well as the leaders of product launches. So our offerings will enable this leadership to be combined with these scientific skills. And I want to pay particular recognition tonight of the collaboration that we have underway with the Faculty of Business, the Business School, in the form of the Master of Science and Master of Business Administration. Over the course of a 2-year program there, coursework postgraduate students will be able to combine skills in science with the MBA core learnings and be able to influence the business world in that regard. Now, the way that tonight will work is going to involve our special guest to my immediate right here, Professor Sharath Sharim, taking us through the thoughts of a number of special guests from both within UTS and outside. And I'll ask Professor Sriram to introduce you to our guests in turn, but first I need to introduce you to him. Professor Sriram jointly leads the Functional Materials and Microsystems Research Group at our MIT University. His research transforms discoveries in materials science and electronics into devices and products for high-speed electronics, sensors, and medical devices. And he is the director of the Discovery to Devices facility for scale-up manufacture of medical devices, and was founding deputy director of the $60 million Micro Nano Research Facility. He's a leader in science research policy and advocacy, having led the Early and Mid-Career Researcher Forum, and he's currently the President of Science and Technology Australia. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sriram, and I would like to hand over to him now to introduce you to our panellists. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for the kind introduction. It's always embarrassing when a bio is read out fully. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Villa and everyone who organized this. The topic we are here, the panel is going to answer the hard questions, not me, is to talk about lab to leadership. But the fundamental reason is leadership solves the big problems of today, tomorrow, and beyond. And so if you look at the UTS focus, which they mentioned, and the panel members here, 2 of the critical problems in society, people's health and the health of the planet. So how do you improve both and sustain them? So we're going to get some leadership gems. I have a few bombs I'm going to throw at them as questions, but we want them coming from you in the room and those online. I've already briefed the panel members. I can never do justice to introducing them. Their CVs have been on the screen. So I'm going to actually flip it around and do it differently. I'm going to ask each of them to talk about their leadership journey briefly. So how did they go from their training to becoming a leader? It always needn't be from the lab, which is the point where the case of half the people here. And I'm going to also ask them to tell us one leader who's inspired their journey. Because often when people are looking to be leaders, they mold themselves based on role models. So on that note, I'll start with you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Kylie Readman. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Education and Students here at UTS. So I have responsibility for the delivery of our curriculum, the learning and teaching and the way we do things here, and also supporting our students to succeed. And I work in a really great team and with a bunch of really great leaders, including James and Willa across the university. So I'm really delighted to be invited to be here. I began my career as a teacher, so I haven't moved too far from my original roots. But I guess, in a way, a classroom is a laboratory of the way that people learn. So I've thought and studied and researched a lot about how people learn, and I bring that to bear in my work today. Over time, I moved from the classroom to a leadership role in the school, to then working with pre-service teachers at a university. And my focus in each of those steps was really about how I could amplify my influence on the number of people that would be engaged in high quality learning. So working with pre-service teachers meant I influenced all of them to then work with students. And I really relished all of those opportunities. Over time, I guess I had more opportunities to lead, and I also sought more opportunities to lead. Even though I was a good teacher, I felt like the best benefit I could do to achieve my goal, which is to transform as many people's lives as possible through education, was to be a learning leader. And so I pursued that. I did a Master of Education in Leadership and Management. And my PhD was looking at how emerging leaders come to understand themselves as leaders and enact the work of leadership. So that's been a kind of constant through line alongside the focus on learning throughout my career. So I've been in leadership roles at 3 different universities: the University of the Sunshine Coast, which is a small regional university. Some of you might know it's in a beautiful location in Queensland. I next went to be PVC Education and then DVC Education and Equity at Murdoch University in Western Australia. So I was there for several years through a period of really rapid transformation. And then I've come to UTS as the DVC Education and Students. So each time with a focus on really myself as a learner and myself as a leader, and working with fantastic leaders at all of those locations to transform education in a way that meant it was more fulfilling, that students had greater success, and that academic staff who my team supported were able to engage more effectively with them, including in the online realm. And so that's become an increasingly important part of my work, and that will maybe come out today. I've just realised we've been talking for a really long time, so I'll stop. Thanks, everyone.
Did you want to add a leader who's inspired you before I hand over to David?
Can I come back to it? I just don't want to take up too much time.
Oh, did.
My name's David Langford. I'm the chair of the Industry Advisory Board at the Science Faculty here at UTS, and I'm also a member of the Advisory Board for the Business School and an adjunct professor in the Business School. I come from a background which is in corporate general management in the telecommunications industry. And was also an investment banker and fund manager with a specialisation in those particular industries over a very long period of time. In terms of my leadership journey and how I sort of came to be doing the things that I was doing, unusually, I suppose, for this group, I'm a business graduate and an accountant by profession. And I fell into the communications industry when Optus was a startup. So I was one of the very early employees there, and worked on in a very specialist regulatory role, which had, there was a small team of us who had a very big impact on the profitability of the company through the negotiations that we had to use Telstra's network infrastructure while we were building our own. And then that was prior to the first tech boom, and I got involved in investment banking from there and got involved in leadership roles from that point on. So it was really a case of using a specific skill in terms of understanding finance, and then finding an industry where there was lots going on and lots of money being put into it and lots of opportunity, and then sort of moving on from there. So I got opportunities. I was one of the stock market analysts who originally took Telstra public, and also was involved in other media companies taking them public, like Austar, the paid television operator who was in regional Australia at the time. And then moved on to sort of roles that were more global in nature, and just sort of opportunities flowed through that. But in terms of the skills that I brought that I think are particularly important from the perspective of what a scientist might bring to leadership, and we'll talk about that a bit more, is I sort of see myself as a corporate diagnostician. And a problem solver. So I look at organisations as living entities, and that's how I sort of think about them and how I analyse them. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. And then in terms of the leaders that I've liked, I mean, Bob Mansfield, who was the original CEO of Optus, was inspirational in terms of the way in which he developed what was quite an amazing culture that got a lot done very quickly when that organisation was established. And then another telecommunications leader who was, he drew some particularly strong views from people, either positive or negative, and that was Sol Trujillo, who was the CEO of Telstra for quite a while. He was somebody who really challenged the status quo. And culturally in Australia, there are a lot of people who had difficulties with that. And, you know, when we deal with leadership, I think that's something that we need to think about and take into account of, you know, from a cultural perspective.
Hi, I'm Catherine Hole. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Association for the Battery Recycling Industry, which is an industry association. I'm also not a scientist by training. I've come with a background in economics and Asian studies for my undergraduate, and that's kind of where I started off in life, in dealing rooms and looking at the Asian economies. And I went, well, that's really interesting. I've picked up some great skills, but it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Moved into government, and that's where kind of my leadership journey began, which I really enjoyed. It was more diverse. I liked the policy development. I liked the environment. But there was also a lot of opportunity, unlike being in commercial for-profit entities, to have kind of a different influence and impact on public policy and environmental outcomes. And that's not to say there's not great corporates out there doing things. It's just what I was more interested in and preferred doing. And through those roles, well, I started off in technical type positions. I also got the opportunity to work on broader projects. Government's really interesting because you have to deal with a whole range of skill sets, a whole range of people, a whole range of different perspectives. So how can you bring those together in a collaborative and positive, and deliver positive outcomes that work for everyone? And I had some really great mentors in some of those roles who really helped me on that journey. So they helped me broaden my leadership skills by giving me opportunities, and putting me out of my comfort zone and helping me in those particular areas. And I really enjoyed that experience. I was still able to bring all the skills. Like every job you have, you'll pick up interesting skills. You never know when it's going to be useful. It might not be useful tomorrow. You might pick it up in 5 years' time, but it definitely comes back at some point in time to being useful. And so I spent 15 years with government, ended up in various senior executive service roles, both with the state government and the Commonwealth government across a very wide range of portfolios. So the knowledge and skills I brought were useful. I could apply them in those jobs, particularly when I was put into areas where I might not have the subject matter knowledge or the industry background. But you can draw on your experience, and you can also then look to others and who can help you. And then, 15 years in government, it's a pretty challenging space to be at times. And I decided it was time for a change. And actually a couple of roles come up with industry associations. And I thought, oh, that's really exciting. I can still do the public policy, still work in the environment space. I have a background in energy markets, did a lot of energy policy when I was with government. And I thought, well, batteries, how hard can that be? And yes, I had to learn a lot, but I could still draw on all that knowledge. And for the industry associations, even though I didn't have the technical background, they have it in spades, so they really didn't need anyone with a technical background. I know this is about lab to boardroom, and that's not to say technical backgrounds aren't important, but it was also that I could bring a different skill set in public policy development, government engagement. Again, the discussion about problem solving and solutions, it's important in every role. And as I say to people who come or deal with government, get to A to B, you might have to go via X and G and H, but you need to know how to do that. You need to know how to take that journey or work with people who can do that and tell the story and the narrative to help people get there. I think for me, the people who I've most admired in leadership, and the current president of the association I work with now is great too. It's people who can see the vision, know how to take the risks, but calculated risks, right? Not crazy. They know the pros and cons of the different options. They know the options might not necessarily be perfect, but they've got a vision. They know where they want to go, but they'll also take you on that journey, but they'll listen to you as well, right? It's not just the vision of one individual. And again, the discussion about questioning the status quo, it's really important, right? Don't assume that things always have to be the same. How can you do it? It's constant improvement. How can you do it better? What could you change? What do you need to drop? What do you need to stop doing in some instances because it's either not relevant or it's not going to get you to your endpoint? So I've had two people I've worked with that are really like that and really positive, right? It's about how do we get there? Or what do we learn from this experience? What do we do differently? How can we do that? What would you do next time? And, those are really great environments to work in. But also for me at the moment, the subject matters, that's important to me, what I work in, that it's environmental, but I also quite like the technical focus of the batteries.
Good evening, everyone. Am I on? Thank you. Sorry. So my name is Duncan Macinnis. My title is Director of Stakeholder Engagement. I work for an organisation called MTPConnect. I am trained as a scientist. I did a PhD in molecular biology and microbiology with a very broad topic of the genetics of beer flavour on a linkage grant with Foster's. I took a bit of a different route to many people in that I didn't do a postdoc, but I have done most of the jobs available to people with a science training background that aren't academic research, in that I've been in sales, I've been in application support, I've been in tech transfer, I've been commercial manager for an ASX listed biotech company, and now my role at MTPConnect is in a quasi-government kind of organisation. We were set up through funding from the federal government back in 2015 as the Industry Growth Centre for MedTech, Pharma, Biotech and Digital Health, and my career to date has been in that sector, and my answers will relate very much to that sector. That's what I've done my entire career. As an organisation, very broadly, we're here to do good stuff for the sector, and in terms of what I do day to day, I could not do it without my PhD, without my technical training. I'm speaking to CEOs, I'm speaking to researchers who want to commercialise things. We work with companies from the very smallest companies, literally a man in a shed the other week, through to the major medtech and pharma multinationals. In terms of leaders who inspire me, I'm going to cheat a bit and pick three. The first is the former chair of MTPConnect, Sue McClayman, and the reason she inspires me is because she genuinely cared about the people that worked for her. The second is Dan Grant, former CEO at MTPConnect, and the reason that I'm going to pick him is because he always, even during the height of COVID when he was working 20-hour days and getting absolutely slammed, he always made you feel like you were on the journey with him. And finally, I'm going to pick my former boss, Beck Tunstall, who I used to report to, and I'm going to pick her because she always challenged the people that she worked for and gave them the space to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add your
Yes, mine is Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, specifically around the introduction of the idea that kindness is a strength of leaders. And I don't think I'd really heard that articulated in such a clear way until I've heard her speak about it, and I know it's been picked up by a lot of people. And I think particularly for women leaders, sometimes those things are seen as not a strength, and I saw her be strong and kind, particularly during COVID, and we talked about that a little bit before. And one of the things she enabled, in my view, was the idea that we should be led by science when making decision-making and influencing government policy, particularly around COVID, and that was something I really admired as well.
Thank you, Kylie. Did you want to add anyone specific? Catherine, name one?
No, I think it's the common themes, right? It's about kindness. It's about taking people on the vision. When I think of the people I've worked with, or if you think of leaders in that space as well, it's taking people on those journeys. It's almost kind of like a skill set, really.
Thank you. I think what stood out for me from all your answers is each of your leadership journeys were underpinned by different values, whether it's educating people or transforming sectors, influencing policy, making people healthy. And I think often for people finding the value which they want to deliver through their life, I think really shapes their leadership journey. And so that really stood out. Each of your answers, every stage was still built around the same value. So I'm going to keep asking questions until anyone steps up and asks, but it's over to you whenever you want. I'd warned you I'm going to ask you a trick question before we get into more meaty ones. The trick question, because a lot of people don't get that distinction, is in your mind, what is the clearest distinction between a manager and a leader? And Kylie, you want to go first?
Okay, I think there's a really clear distinction between leading and managing, because leading is about the future and where we can be going, and it is about inspiring people to come on the journey with you. It's about devising strategy, it's about thinking through problems and leading people, whereas I think managing is actually about the operationalisation of the strategy. It's more of the day-to-day work. It's still a really important skill set. I don't think one's more important than the other, actually, but I think you can be a good you can probably do a lot of good management tasks without necessarily moving into leadership. Whereas I think if you are a leader, you've already got a management skill set behind you. I hope that's a reasonable distinction to make.
Thank you.
It's a really interesting question. And the initial sort of thought that I come up with is that managers are just leaders in training. And the reason why I think that is that for an organisation to be successful, everybody's got to be pulling in the same direction, and pulling and making a specific, a contribution, and a contribution that's expected and required. And whilst managers may be process oriented very much in terms of the focus of time that they have, they need to set the agenda for the teams that they're working with, and setting the agenda is very much rather than it's a service function. It's a showing, not telling. It's a good leader and a good manager, but a good leader does shows everybody else what they should do, how they should be expected to deliver an outcome. I was always of a view, when I was an analyst, pretty much right through my career, and whether or not I was, a general manager at Telstra or whether I was somebody in a firm covering stocks, it was, I thought it was really important to show those around me what I thought was a good outcome by what I delivered and how I treated people and what I expected of them and what I expected of myself. So I'm a big believer that no matter where you stand in the sort of hierarchy or structure of an organisation, you still need to be doing the do. You actually need to be doing the day-to-day function in your role. So, from my perspective, I was always looking at companies, whether or not I was leading a team or leading a team of analysts or dealing with internal strategy issues, say when I was a general manager at Telstra.
Yeah, I find the distinction sometimes a bit blurry and everyone will use the words interchangeably and you don't necessarily know what they're talking about. So always good to clarify. Every role needs some delivery, some execution function, which I tend to lump myself in the management category. But again, every role needs leadership. I mean, even when you go into your first job, there's still a lot more learning and doing rather than necessarily setting direction. But if you are thinking of career advancement, what does that look like? What additional skills are you going to show? What direction are you going to show? How are you bringing others along? How are you setting by example? How are you also influencing that direction, albeit you might not be the direction setter, but it's also important to have those discussions around, well, this could be done better, or this is where I think we need to go. There might be a lot less of that in junior roles, and the switch will change as the roles become more senior. But it's constantly thinking about both those functions in whatever job, or both those skill sets, or whatever job you're doing.
I definitely agree that both are necessary. I read something recently, I think it was something along the lines of managers deliver what they have to deliver in line with the constraints they're given. Leaders question why those constraints exist. And I wonder whether you might have put that on LinkedIn, Sharath. I'm not
That
sure.
wasn't me, but my question was to spark that thought process. And I think each of your answers highlights that people have to be conscious about being a manager or a leader. Because in a leadership role, you're looking beyond the horizon while delivering the day-to-day as a manager. So I think that's sort of why I had that question. I think getting to the crux of our topic today, in the lab to leadership context, the aspect of scientific training and the role it plays in leadership or the opportunities it creates. So we want people trained in science to be in every sector, not just in technology companies, in educating people, in shaping science policy, in helping even investment firms make advanced decisions, you could say, with technical smarts built into their decision making. So I think if each of you could think of one place where science stood out in your decisions, in your day-to-day activity or a particular incident or a project, and you really valued that piece. Because obviously all of you on stage understand the value of science, otherwise you wouldn't have said yes to being here. For me, as a scientist, a few things stand out when I look at it. The only guarantee a person in science has is failure. An experiment won't work or a grant won't get up. But what you learn from it and do with it actually shapes your journey. And so I know Catherine referred to that. So I found that interesting. So anyone like to go first?
I'm happy to jump in because it's really dear to my heart at the moment with the challenges with lithium batteries. Science for us is an absolute must-have, particularly with a technology. I know it's not new, but it's probably new in the extent to which it's being rolled out, and particularly causing challenges in the waste sector with fires. But the other part of this is it's all quite new in some of those respects about how do we manage that, what does good safe storage and handling look like. So we couldn't live without science in our field and the evidence base, right, that's going to bring. And even if there might be failure or lack of knowledge at the moment, it still sets the parameters, it'll set the envelope for us about how we'll then respond to policy. So it's absolutely critical.
Thank you. Duncan, I'll target a question in a slightly different way. You deal with a lot of startups, small companies, most of them technology-based. So how have you found that intersection of science and business and translation?
It's like you were reading my mind, Sharath. I was going to answer the question a slightly different way, in that a lot of what I see and a lot of what I see in the value of this course is early stage innovators. So people who have an idea, they've got some great science, a cool new widget they've discovered, and they want to commercialize it. And they say, we want to commercialize this. The science is great, but what makes a commercially successful product is not the science. You can almost, to a degree, assume that the science will work. How is the regulation going to work? How is it going to get paid for? Who's the customer? What is the competition? What is the competition going to do when you bring in this new product? What is the patent position? What does your IP lawyer say about it? So the science is super important, but I think the value of the course like this and a course like learning these leadership skills is understanding there's more to commercialization than that. When I was engaging with Willa on design of the course, I said, if I could go back and give 18-year-old me a piece of advice, what I would say is learn the fundamentals of finance, the basic principles of finance. I don't know if I'd listen, but that is what I would give you. So I would say the science is important, other stuff's important as well.
Wonderful. I like that. And that's a nice segue for me to ask David a follow-up question. Obviously, given you looked at the telecommunication policy, changing status quo, investing in companies, how has science informed how we want policy to work?
I sort of preempted the question, and I've been thinking about it as we've been talking. And interestingly, in the communications industry, developments have been very much driven by engineering rather than science, which is actually, just kind of massaging the existing science rather than fundamentally changing anything. And I think that so just contextually, why scientific leadership is going to be so important going forward is we've gone through and are still going through significant change in the way in which people go about living their lives through the use of information technology and communications technology. I think apart from AI, apart from that, much of that change is substantively done. I think the big challenges now are clearly human health challenges and energy challenges. And energy challenges as they relate to climate in terms of the expectations of what the impacts are going to be. So I think that science is actually is at a pivot point or an inflection point in terms of importance. It's going to become much more important than it might have been, from a higher level and public policy perspective, and also from a nation building perspective, within Australia, which is taking us away from, what we've done in the past in terms of utilising existing technology or digging holes in the ground. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I don't know, we didn't plan it this much, but it leads on nicely to what I wanted to ask you. And you did refer to it when we were having a chat about how science came to the forefront during COVID and how you balance that with leadership in communicating it. So what are your views on the significance of science in shaping how you inform people about where future lies?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And I'll give a little anecdote and then try and answer it a little bit more. In my leaders team meeting today, we were talking about the vision that the university has, and one of the elements of our vision is about being a university that has a global impact. So these are my education leaders, my people who lead the students' domain in our university. And they really started saying, well, what's the point of all of this education, if we can't save the world? So that's a really important challenge, right? So we've got to deal with people. Our vehicle is education, so that we can educate as many people as possible to get on with the work of saving the world. And it wasn't a flippant conversation at all. These are a group of educational leaders who are very committed to that work. And that work takes the scientific inquiry. I mean, James talked about evidence-based as being a particular identifier of scientific leadership, that scientists take an evidence base when they're making decisions. You talked about the fact that the only sure thing in scientific inquiry is failure, but what you learn from that failure. So that interplay of science and learning and progress towards having an impact is absolutely critical in the way that we think about our work. And that's why I'm really committed to, I was telling David before we started, two things. One, that our education is digital and has digital elements. That doesn't mean that a place-based laboratory or place-based inquiry is unimportant. It is. But if we are serious about getting that knowledge out to as many people as possible across the globe, it must be digital and in a format that can be accessible to those people, and it must be global. So we have to take ourselves as a university of brilliant minds. I love working at UTS because they take it really seriously. The leaders I work with are always looking forward about how they can take their knowledge and communicate that with new learners who will then take it further, right? And they're always pushing the boundaries of what learning looks like. And I think taking it into a global environment, beyond the Sydney, beyond the Australia, connecting as leaders with others so that our learners have a platform to really influence is just such a powerful thing to do. And I'm really in awe of the people who put forward and designed and contributed to the design of these programs, because they will have a substantial impact on the way leadership in science goes forward, and leadership beyond science to all of the different aspects of society that will utilise science to then make good decisions.
Thank you. I think this is what happens when we have fun. I realized as a chair I have 1 minute left to wrap up, but I'm going to, that means give all of you a few seconds. For people listening, if you were to give them one value to hold dear on their leadership journey, what would you say it is? So I'm going to start with you. Others get more time to think.
One value. I'm going to have to defer and let somebody else have a go.
Well, I'd like to do two. I can't count.
So
I think
that's
the
a leadership
discussion
trait.
around the kindness and how you treat others is really important, but also being true to yourself, right? So doing what you believe in and you enjoy is really important.
Thank you, Catherine.
Just the one thing, I think leadership is about service. It's about serving those who work with you.
Wonderful.
My value is curiosity. I recently was at the University of Bologna, where the establishment of the first kind of catalogue of natural science occurred a long, long time ago. And I thought that was curiosity in action at a time where curiosity was not a value. And in fact, lots of people thought it was a sin, the church. So curiosity has moved us forward in incredible ways. So I think leaders have to hold on to that.
I would say, as a leader, ensure that you're enabling the people that you lead.
Thank you. And that's a wonderful set of answers to wrap up. I hope you've taken a lot from this and it shapes your leadership journey. And so we need all of you to be influencing our future, and especially aligned to this, like I said, focusing on the health of people and the planet. It needs leaders creating solutions. So on that note, thank you to the panel members for answering in detail, sharing personal thoughts. I welcome you to thank them. And I'll hand back to James to wrap up.
Thanks a lot, Sharath. So I myself have been a leader for a long time, and I've thought a lot over the years about what leadership means. I've been very interested in hearing the reflections of the colleagues here. Undoubtedly, for me, you can't be a good leader unless you fundamentally like people, because without people in the organisation, what have you got? You cannot bring people with you on the journey, on the vision that you have for the organisation, unless you like to take the time to work with people, help solve their problems, and inspire them to be even better in their own areas of expertise, because you as the leader can't know about everything. You need to rely on the people around you to be good at what they do to help maximise the outcomes for everybody. So at the end of a long career, I think the best leaders will be able to look back on their time and get the greatest satisfaction from whatever small impact they've had on influencing the direction that those that they've worked alongside have taken in their own lives. So I'm sure all of you got a lot from hearing these diverse perspectives from our guests. Please join me in thanking all of them. Now, as the Dean, it would be remiss of me too, were I not to remind you that earlier in the year we had the happy task of launching our new Faculty of Science strategic plan. I have a few copies down the back in case anybody would like to take one home with them. There are a number of strategic priorities in the plan, but a major one is to position our graduates for success as confident and capable scientists of the future. And one of the major goals within this priority is to equip our students with the skills and attributes they need to be job ready. So I hope that the suite of Lab to Leadership programs within the faculty are going to be a really powerful measure to take us in the direction of fulfilling that particular priority and goal. Happy days ahead for the Faculty of Science. Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you again to those of you online. We do have some refreshments for you, I believe, out the back. So please stay around and enjoy those. Thank you again very much to Willa for the initiative behind this event. And thank you to Kyan and Sammy from the Faculty of Science who assisted with the organisation of it. And I also am required to acknowledge the OPM program directors and the Key Path team for their work in coordinating this evening. Thank you very much again, and a very good evening to all of you.